A very good afternoon, students. We were reading Making Friends, and this is a very fascinating story and interesting too that surrounds four sisters. The whole story is based on a family. Actually, I should say two families. The first one consisted of four sisters. Four are different types. One is tomboys, that is Joe. Four out of the four sisters, one is Joe, and it is said that she is tomboyish. There is another one called Meg, who is beautiful. Another one is thin, and the last one, she has beautiful curly hairs like cascade. They are living with their mother, as their father is out in the war. So, in their neighborhood, there is a family, a big mansion. There lives a little boy named Laurie. That boy is living there alone. Probably he has lost his parents, and he is living with his grandpa. So, besides his grandpa, the only other member in the family is a housemaid. But these two people, they cannot suffice the needs of a little child like Laurie. None of them can play with him, can read some interesting and comic stories for him, or keep on lengthy conversations with Laurie. These are the things the boy or girl of Laurie's age demands most. Continuing conversations, having some fun, someone is reading some funny story to them, for them, and at the same time someone who can bring something for the little boy or girl, some food, some toys, someone who can play with him. So these are the things which a boy like or a girl of Laurie's age demands most. But there is no one in his family who can provide all these things. Now Joe, who is a type of tomboyish, who is so active, one day she finds that little Laurie is living alone, and it might be little difficult for him to live in such a way, keeping most of the time inside a room. That's why she felt a little bit compassionate towards him, and she decides to help him out, give him some company, do some funny things with that little boy to bring entertainment in his life. So, keeping this in mind, she visits his home with some present of a beautiful, delicious sweet called blancmange, and of course, some kittens. And she met the boy. They had a nice conversation. But one more thing Joe decided to do, to have a talk with Laurie's grandpa, to let him know that your grandson might be feeling lonely, and we are here to give him company. Could you please let us to take her, take him with us to our home, where my mother would like to welcome him, and we would also like to give him company, bring some entertainment in his life. That was Joe's intention. So now in scene 4, which is the last scene of this drama, there Joe decides to visit and meet Mr. Laurie, the grandpa of little Laurie. So while before entering into the library, where Mr. Lawrence, I should say probably, what is his surname? Let me check. Lawrence, I think. Yes, Mr. Lawrence. He spends most of the time in his library. So there, Joe and little Laurie is standing, and after some time the maid came there and she informed that Mr. Lawrence is about to come, you stay here. After hearing this, little Laurie, he escaped because he was a bit scared and a little bit uncommunicative with his grandpa, who seldom used to read some stories for Laurie, but because those funny little comic stories did not arouse interest in Mr. Lawrence, he could not continue the thing for a long time. He used to leave it abruptly, and Laurie used to stay there alone inside his room. So, this is Mr. Lawrence, who is about to visit Miss Jo. So, Mr. Lawrence is a kind of personality that is grave, patient, a little bit laconic. Laconic means someone who talks less. And on the other hand, there is Miss Jo, who is garrulous, talkative, loquacious in nature, very lively presence she has. So, two opposite characters are about to meet. Let's see what happens as the story begins. And this is the last part of this drama. This drama is actually based on a particular story, and the whole story has been dramatized by the author to make it, to represent it in a different way to the readers like you and those boys and girls of your age. So the curtain rise to a library scene in the Lawrence house. Once at the completion of the scene 3, this is actually the rule that hold if you were watching a drama in a stage and the actors are staging something, and once the scene is completed, the whole stage becomes dark or the curtain falls, and with the beginning of the next scene the curtain rises, it is raised, or the lights lit up. That's what happens in a stage drama. Here is no such exception, and once the curtain is up, we can watch a stage which is decorated in a way that give you the impression as if you are watching a library. There are rows of racks, and their books are there, lined way the books. So many things are there, and of course one more thing which is written here, the room is lined with books, and there are pictures and statues and distracting little cabinets full of coins and curiosities. Curiosities means those little objects which are lying on the table, and these objects are rare, and these objects kindle interest in your mind. These objects kind curiosity in your mind, that's why they are curiosities. So those things were lying scattered on the table. On the wall is a portrait of a handsome, stone-faced elderly man. A maid walks in. So on the wall there is a portrait of a man who is elderly, aged. Her face, countenance of her face is very stern, rigid. And right then a maid walks in and informs something. What is it? The doctor to see you, sir. Laurie walks away, and Jo is left standing before the portrait of the old gentleman, as if there is the portrait and Laurie is standing in my place watching the portrait with a lot of amazement, surprise, that my God, am I going to meet that person? She was thinking. So many things were hovering around her head, and she was thinking all about that person, and unknowingly she was making some comments. She started talking with herself. That's what happened there. She forgot everything about the place where she was standing. She forgot all about that she was about to meet a person who is on his way. Anytime he can reach there, just she was thinking about the picture and making some comments unknowingly. being unknown to the presence of that very person. Later you will see it. Let's see. So the door opens and someone walks in, but Joe is completely unaware of it. It is the old gentleman in the painting. He is dressed in an elegant suit and seems surprised to see a young girl in the room. But before he can say anything to Joe begins speaking without turning. Means Joe was continuously watching the portrait. She could not understand that the person whom she was about to meet already reached there. That person was standing right behind Joe. Joe was totally unaware of the presence of that person. And now she is making some comments about the person who was standing right behind Joe. But Joe was absolutely unaware of his presence. Let's see what happens and what kind of things Joe is speaking. I'm sure now that I shouldn't be afraid of him, for he's got kind eyes, though his mouth is grim, and he looks as if he has a tremendous will. He isn't as handsome as my grandfather, but I like him. So now Joe is telling my God, this is the person I'm about to meet. The portrait suggests that the person has some kind eyes, might be generous, though that person is having a stern, rigid face, resolute appearance. But still, I think I don't need to get afraid of that very person, and he will be kind to me. These are the comments she was making, completely unaware of the presence of the same person who was standing right behind her. Grandfather, in a gruff voice, she is answering, "Thank you, ma'am." This is the only dialogue we get from the grandpa, "Thank you, ma'am." So he heard everything, whatever Joe said about him, without getting aware of his presence. And now he is answering her, "Thank you, ma'am. Whatever you said, thank you for this." Joe gives a squeal of dismay. She is utterly surprised, completely taken aback, shocked. "Oh my God, who is answering me?" And the moment she turns around, she sees the same person was standing right behind her. And again she got startled, surprised, amazed, and of course puzzled what to do right at that time, became confounded. She was holding her mouth like that. "Oh my God, what have I done?" And right in such a comic situation, the whole scene ends, and our story also ends here. And whirls around, and her hand clapped to her mouth as she stares at old Mr. Lawrence. Curtain falls. So Miss Joe is staring at Mr. Lawrence with full of amazement, and Mr. Lawrence is looking at her quite normally. In such a scene, in such a frame, the whole drama ends and the curtain falls. This was very interesting, and I should say this is enticing, very funny to read and to imagine that such kind of thing is happening. I'd like to know from you whether in your life, if you have found yourself in such a position where you were telling something about someone without knowing his presence, that person was actually hearing, and he was within the reach wherefrom he or she could hear whatever you were telling. But you were completely unaware of that person's, whether it is he or she, that person's presence. You need to write something and send it to me. You need to imagine. If you do not have that kind of experience, you imagine and try to write it and do send it to me. I will be expecting your answers. So that's all for today, students. We will meet next time with a new poem, and again an interesting poem, a new topic from your reader. That's all for today, students. Let's call it a day. Ta-da.